All right, got some thoughts on high intensity training and why specifically I'm, for the most part, hanging up the experimentation I've been doing for the better part of really most of 2024, I'd say, and even latter part of 2023. But my primary interest in getting into high intensity training was just kind of learning more about different people's approaches to a very simplistic training concept, or relatively is pretty simplistic. And for the most part, that is choosing very effective exercises before them to failure. It does not have to be in one set, or it could be some forced reps or whatever, but get them to, at the very least, many will say momentary muscular failure, which is the point where you really can't lift another rep. Then simply recover as optimally as possible and then repeat these steps over again. And I think right away what's great about it, and the only reasons I just adopted it because I was just simply really busy and got used to this kind of new schedule of kind of freeing up some time, and again, just mix things up, is that it is such a very simplistic training concept. I think for most people is very attractive. Conversely to, I don't want to say high volume, but traditional conventional ways of resistance training that has so many variables that many people start scratching their heads and they really get lost in the weeds, all of which I think is totally unnecessary, but I totally understand. And many of the concepts that I kind of talk on this channel hopefully bring things down to a more simple level. That's my ultimate goal here. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to share high intensity training with you, because I think just like with sharing equipment or anything else, some of you guys might get something out of it, maybe never heard of it before. But I've definitely gone back to what I used to do and I think is very effective, especially for me. I think it is another way of training. You can say it's conventional, it's definitely more higher volume, but here are the reasons basically why I have decided to actually put the high intensity training on the back burner, and just some general things I noticed along the way. Personal experiences, personal preferences, definitely. I'm just sharing with you guys though. First thing is just the workout in general. Now, generally high intensity training is extremely brief and of course very intense and very difficult, all of which I would say is very true. Now, some people like put this on like a level of superiority of being like, I'm doing something harder than you are. And I have found throughout the years, anybody who's done personal training, worked with clients, people typically by default think that harder is always better. That's never been my mantra specifically, because I've certainly seen a plethora of results come from all walks of life, not literally busting themselves and killing themselves in the gym with phenomenal results. So I can just say that is definitely true. I'll first just say working harder in short, brief periods of time for some people might be easier, in my opinion. They just like getting 10, 15 minutes out of the way. And that last few sets, while it's mentally draining and definitely not something to look forward to, once it's done versus they got to come in, check the box, and do other things for a longer period of time. I'm saying longer, very relative here, because that can kind of be hit or miss a little bit. But my point is, my training was not really that enjoyable. It started to be something that, yes, I look forward to. After many days off, I would take 4 to 5 days off in between, which was much different to what I used to be doing, which was attractive at first because it did save time. However, once I got in there, it was just this mental mind shift where usually I like to kind of listen to music. It's kind of a point in time for me to just kind of move my body, get the blood flowing, the endorphins are going, I feel good. But this is just like pretty much get down to business, let's get it done. And so while the workouts, they were great and they were efficient, once I was done, as I said before, and even recent videos, I'll just use the basic analogy I've been using is I literally felt like I was hit by a truck. So I would know in the back of my head that this is the one facet in time where I'm going to be training. So you take it very seriously that this is maybe the one chest set or 2 or 3 chest sets I might be doing. So I'm going to put forth full effort knowing that when I get to that point of like I would normally stop, this is when it gets going and I'm going to drive home hard as much as I can. And so by doing that, it would really leave absolutely nothing in the tank. And I can keep this brief here and just saying that the days following it were just not fun. I mean, I just felt like my body and my energy overall was drained. I didn't feel like doing really anything physical at all whatsoever. I wouldn't say I had necessarily tendonitis, but I was very, very sore, not the good way. I felt it more in my joints. I would feel it in spots that are more like assistance exercises, not even in the primary area. And while some people say it is the safest way to train, I think most people can attest the fact, I'm not saying this is the exact same parallel here, but many people know, and I've known very early on, that injuries really happen on those sets where you're gonna grind it out no matter what. And sometimes it happens with the mode or style you're doing, certainly heavy weights and the way you're performing it, no question, but there's definitely the point where I was pushing normally way harder than I would have stopped, and I'm feeling the tension less on my muscles and more on my joints. And like I said at the start here, I do think most people actually in their head intuitively think harder is better. That's why programs like CrossFit, Orange Theory, even a lot of at-home workout systems like P90X were intuitively just very hard. Many people throughout the ages have talked about this, that one of the potential issues with this is that it has a lot of momentum early on and you kind of burn out. The very famous, and may he rest in peace, Leroy Colbert, who I used to love dearly, his workout advice videos would often talk about that he would avoid people training so intensely and so hard because people would simply just burn out and they're not going to last. They'd injure themselves or just not going to last for a long period of time. Now I know there's a lot of people out there already that's saying, well, I've done high intensity training for a long period of time and I feel good. And for sure, I think there's a right way of doing it. But for some people, that might cause issues. And I think we're always hearing those success stories because I can't tell you the number of people that have told me either they've jumped on the bandwagon, so to speak, and they're seeing great results. You don't hear from them later as a follow-up. Or people have told me like, yeah, I use it from time to time. It's not something I can stick with long-term. Just doesn't feel good. I do feel burnt out. I'm not saying that would necessarily mean it is just a different cycle or wave of training that you kind of have to get used to. Conversely to what I was doing, which is, and I'm still going back to now, which is not feeling like you have to kill yourself. Yes, you are pushing yourself. And even though it seems like you're doing higher frequency and you're moving your body more, some of the high intensity advocates would say, well, this is going to lead to more joint injury and more issues, gradual buildup of fatigue that's always kind of there. I actually feel the opposite. When I'm doing something every day that is not pushing it to the red line, I actually felt great. Never had any injuries throughout, 20 plus years. At least anything that was like devastating. I had to take like weeks off. In fact, you guys know I've never taken a week off ever in my training, which I think attests to the fact that really I've avoided injuries this long. And to use this kind of suntan analogy that high intensity people like to use, which I'm not saying is a bad analogy, with the Mike Menser thing of like different ways you can get a sunburn or you can get a suntan through the stimulus of the sun. I think that's a perfect analogy because you can go in the weight room and get the equivalent of going out in scorching heat or going into a tanning salon with like the highest grade lamps and just blitz yourself red like a lobster and then eventually get a tan over time. In fact, I know many people that do that. They go on vacation, they spend one day getting sunburned and then they let that kind of last. Obviously not a safe thing to do. Or you can do something that is gradual, which is getting on the sun a little bit at a time and just building up a nice base tan and kind of just maintaining that. And I would say that is very similar to the stimulus and adaptation that you could do in two extremes of the level. And to those people that are high intensity have said, well, that might be one way and high intensity is more optimal, gets more people results. Ironically, they will say, well, it's that genetically gifted and get away with kind of subpar training. I extremely beg to differ out of my own personal results. I've seen with myself and definitely with clients. And you can just go through any before and after page of pretty much any fitness program or whatever, and you will see tons of before and after transformations that, yes, some people genetically don't have like the muscle bellies and the shape there, but you will see a lot of great transformations through some very basic traditional programming that does, of course, work. Because I've pushed back with John Jaquish on the channel before where he says, well, it's only genetically gifted that can get away with this type of training. Everyone else walks around, looks like they could work at Pizza Hut. And I pushed back slightly and said, I don't think that's the case. I think a lot of it's just, there's a number of variables that go into that. I don't think it's just pure genetics that some people respond very well versus others do not. And ironically, there's a lot of high intensity people, nothing against it all whatsoever, that also promote things like TRT and things like that. So nothing against that. My point is that I think there's enough anecdote, scientific evidence, and just, I would say the vast majority of people that I've seen work with that do just basic stuff, it works. You just gotta follow the program and just kind of stick to it and be consistent. Same thing I'd say is true with high intensity training. But to sum this up, ultimately I would say I loved it. I think it's a great training modality for some people to at least experiment with. I think it might be a preferred way of training for a lot of people. It saves them and frees them up a lot of time. It's a very simplistic system, probably the most simplistic training system out there in my opinion. I know some people say you have to get trained to failure, and I think there's maybe some elements of truth to that. I felt like I was definitely there, and if I was going to be pushing any more beyond that, I don't think I really would like that, just based on my own personal results so far. If anything, I could have used better recovery techniques. But albeit, I will just say to sum this up, I just feel like I was feeling better, performing better, and I was getting greater, if not the same results. And that's the final point I did not say. I keep saying final point here, is that when you compare apples to apples here, high intensity versus high volume, whatever, I don't see much of a difference, me personally, of people that are pushing it one way or the other. And if, in fact, I would say there's a greater pool of people doing the traditional way, getting results, than the other way. That's it though, guys. Any questions, comments, feedback down below, let me know down below in the description box. Your thoughts on it. Not knocking the system at all whatsoever. I think it's a great tool in the toolbox for training, but that's just my own personal thoughts about it. See you guys on the next video.